Any questions at this point? All right. And if you have questions, just jump in and start talking. I'm going to then begin our sharing. In this case, I'll even share the sound. So I'm picking up here. We went through this chapter, how cultural-prenes organize people. And we talked about Pope Francis, formerly Jorge Mario Bergoglio, and we gave this traditional view of how he got to be Pope. Okay. And then we gave this other view, which I'm calling the cultural-prenes view, and of how he became Pope. And they're rather different, right? So let's talk about some of the aspects that make these two views different, and also address the question of, are they contradictory? Okay. So any remarks in that regard? Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Rashad.
Hi, Professor. So I think they're not. I wouldn't say they are contradictory per se. It's just that in the first view, the sort of the agent, sort of the causal factor, if maybe you could use that word, seems to be the person, right? Jorge Mario Bergoglio. And in the second view, it seems to be the print, right?
Yes, yes, totally agree. Uh, so the traditional view is sort of people-centric, right? People do things, people are running the show. They are, as you say, the agents. In the cultural-prenes view, uh, they have a very different role to play. They are merely the instruments of the cultural-prenes. It's a very different view of what the role of humans are in this setting. And that's kind of cuts to the heart of the difference between the cultural-prenes view of sociology and the traditional view. Do you want to see people as the important agents, the prime movers, or do you want to see the cultural-prenes? And they're very, very different, right? On the other hand, are they contradictory? Uh, so I don't know. I don't see them as contradictory. I see them just simply as two different views. There must be other arenas in which we have two different views of what's going on. Uh, and uh, and that they're just two different views, and they each can reveal different and important aspects of a phenomenon, in this case, becoming Pope, that occurs in the real world. So I just wanted to reflect any more on this particular issue. All right. So now I want to move to the next chapter, which is how cultural-prenes acquire people. And so
Professor,
we'll begin I'm
before we
sorry,
move on,
what?
I had one more
Yes,
question. Nathan here. Um,
Nathan.
yes, so I understand the cultural preens set is going to like assign positions to different members, depending on their kind of individual preens as well. Does the culture preen set determine the number of positions? Right. So obviously
Oh,
we have like,
yes, yes, it does. So, for example, how many people are in Congress in the
right,
United
yeah.
States?
Mhm.
Right? There's 435. Okay.
Right. Gotcha.
And these numbers really, it's an interesting thing. Uh, uh, a friend and colleague of mine, another mathematician, named Joel Zeitlin, he went back and looked at previous presidential elections because the number of electoral votes, I think this is roughly right, is there's one electoral vote for every congressman. Okay. And so how did we get to, 435? Well, the House chose it for itself. I mean, that's part of their organization of themselves that I think is dictated in the Constitution. What's interesting is uh, Joel went back and he wrote a paper on this that said, well, what if they had chosen 436 or
Mhm.
434 or some other number? And it turns out that you don't have to go far from 435 to have the lineage of presidents of the United States change. So that choice, which we could see as a cultural-prenes choice, it's what's currently in our culture, uh, is actually pivotal in the direction this country has taken historically. Good question. Thanks, Nathan. Anything else on this? Okay, so this is the next chapter. How do cultural-prenes acquire people? So we'll just do the usual. If you can't hear this because I messed up, please let me know as soon as possible.
How cultural preens acquire people. Upon birth you begin to acquire cultural preens from the societies to which you are exposed. Many of these societies existed long before you showed up, and they have been waiting for you. They intend to exploit you and have evolved extremely refined methods to make the most of their opportunity. Their behavior bears much in common with the behavior of predatory species
In nature. Okay, so uh, figure 6, ruthless predatory preen warriors and their prey. Okay. The one on the left is, of course, if you said that about that image, no one would complain or suggest that you were wrong. But this right image is quite different, right? It's a nice, soft, warm image. But I'm going to argue that the teacher in that image is a ruthless predatory preen warrior, and the kid is its prey. Okay. So, to continue.
The cheetah lies in wait and then, in a sudden astonishing burst of speed, overtakes and kills its helpless prey. The Venus flytrap uses the promise of food to entice its prey, then gently imprisons and consumes it. The approaches societies use to capture their prey are just as diverse.
Okay, so different societies have different means of capturing prey.
I will describe one approach used by the Catholic Society as an example, but many other approaches by many other societies would serve as well. If the Catholic Society gains access to you, it will begin to use the instruments it controls, such as members, money, buildings, music, and art, to infuse you with cultural prenes which you may store in your brain. The longer it can maintain access, the more cultural prenes you will acquire. You may be taught the cultural prenes of the catechism early on, but only much later, if at all, are you likely to be taught the Universi Dominici Gregis prene.
How many of you know the Universi Dominici Gregis prene? Well, I would assume nobody. And of course, I had never heard of this, before I investigated this kind of thing. We'll mention it again. At any rate, even if you are a Catholic, it's very unlikely you have acquired this particular prene.
Many of the prey the Catholic society encounters will be children under the control of their Catholic parents. This typically provides a period of several years during which the child will be retained and infused with cultural prenes. The society's cultural prenes have evolved through centuries to make the most out of these opportunities. The child may be enrolled in church-associated schools, Bible study groups, choirs, soccer teams, teen groups, etc. These institutions provide a means of extending the retention time of the growing child while additional cultural prenes are infused. Just as the positions in a society are determined by positional cultural prenes, the institutions are determined by a subset of cultural prenes we might call institutional cultural prenes.
So just like the positions are determined, the Catholic Church probably didn't have teen groups, and the institutions needed to support them probably until recently. I'm sure that by now they also have, online groups that didn't exist. So, and presumably uh, some other institutions of the past, for example, oh, well, I don't know, an example, but if you go back, let's say to 800, uh, there was no officially Catholic until after the Reformation. So let's go to 1600. Presumably, they had other institutions, which are now they've gotten rid of. Okay. So that's another part of the cultural principle.
Among the most important things the society will do with the time available is to infuse the child with cultural prenes, such as the Be Fruitful and Multiply prene and what I'll call the Children Must Be Raised in the Faith prene, that will increase the
Okay, so the Be Fruitful and Multiply prene is found in Genesis. Okay. But there's also, and it's a big preen, I've given it this sort of rough name, that if you're a Catholic, it's impressed upon you the importance that if you have children, even if you don't marry a Catholic, those children will be raised in the Catholic faith. Another big ticket item. And this is a very important thing, this kind of thing. And here's why.
Children must be raised in the faith prene, that will increase the probability that when the child grows up, they will become a parent and repeat the process. This kind of recursion is common among many religious and national societies.
So I don't know about you, but whatever your national identity is, it might well be the national identity of your parents. And no matter what religion, it might be the same as your parents. If you're in such a situation, Would it make your parents happy or unhappy if you married someone outside of your nation, for example, who didn't speak the language of your nation or outside of your religion? Now, maybe I'm just too old school for this. Um, would it matter to your parents? Yeah. And would they try to direct you to not or exert some form of pressure to have you not marry such a person? For example, either um, make sure that the your courtship is controlled so that you only meet people who are of your same culture, or threaten you with things like, well, then I'm not going to give you a whole bunch of money to support you. Does that resonate with anybody?
I can tell you from an Italian point of view.
Yes, I'd love it, Marco. Please.
So, my first wife, which was Italian American, we married in Italy, in church. Okay, so
Yes.
obviously my mother was very happy. Uh, yeah. Uh, my second wife, which is actually Canadian from Quebec, but Irish origin, so still very Catholic.
Yes.
But we married in Hawaii, in Maui, with just a couple of friends with an Hawaiian marriage. And, my parents were still in Italy, were still living. My mother didn't like that, but we still got the money.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that. That's the bottom line, Marco. You're
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Okay, Kusha Kala.
Hi. Yeah, I definitely feel that pressure from my parents as well. It's more of like a I think it's more of just a less than it is like disapproval. It's more of like just a cultural disconnect. That's the biggest problem.
Mhm.
Where it's they're more it's out of a place of like it's out of a place of love. It's just they're concerned about cultural disconnect between families mostly. Um it's a like I come from a very like familiar family oriented culture. So
I'm
when
sorry, I missed a word or two. The last sentence, please.
I come from a really like family oriented culture,
Yes. Mhm.
so that's their fear is that if a conflict occurs within a relationship, it cause like familial problems on both sides.
Yes, yes. So now taking the cultural preens point of view, do you see the advantage of having children learn these messages to um, stay within the culture? In the Catholic Church, it takes the form I've indicated there, and also be fruitful and multiply. Uh, I can't think of a culture other than, for example, the Shakers uh, that doesn't have some form of, you know, be fruitful and multiply, right? I mean, your parents may have impressed upon you that they would love to have grandchildren. Okay. So, why is this just a brilliant idea on the part of the cultural preens of many religions and national societies?
Um, Nathan here. Um, I assume it's the most efficient way to increase the preen count.
Yes. And yes, Nathan, it's certainly a very efficient way, right? Because the societies like the Catholic Church, depending on if you choose the name Catholic, then you got to go back to like 1520 or something till now. Um, then uh, that has continued for a very long time. but people don't live that long. So there's a constant decline in copy numbers of the cultural prenes that are stored in the heads of people because they're going to disappear in, 80 years or so. So there's this, natural pressure to have the copy numbers go down. And this is a way to renew that, right? Get new members. And so I don't know, like we have the example of the Shakers who, didn't have go out and have kids. And we know what happened to them. Does anybody know of any other national or religious society that doesn't engage in these two kind of things? Have kids and stay in the faith?
I think I can think of one. Could you consider cults like the People's Temple or cults that are death cults? And then
Yeah.
they have these priests and then they kind of just die.
Yeah,
So
wait. So this is the one with the Kool-Aid thing?
yes, exactly.
Yes.
Jonestown,
Okay.
Jonestown, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So Caleb
Yes,
Talley.
yes, that's
Okay. Yeah. Let's consider that. So yeah, there was this cult leader, he's called, but he was the leader of a society. And his name is Jim Jones. And we're talking about probably in the 1960s or something. And he had amassed a very large following. I think it probably was guessing more than 500 and less than 2,000, but it was substantial. And he had this following, and most of them, I think, were from America, including Jim Jones, but they moved to, what was the place they moved to?
Guyana, I think.
Okay, Julian, thanks. Guyana, yes. Is it officially South America or is that Central
Yeah, it's
America?
South America, yeah.
Okay. And Jim Jones was being investigated by members of Congress, as I recall. And some member of Congress came down to Guyana to visit his, I'm reluctant to say cult because that's judgmental, right? And preen theory is not judgmental. So anyway, came down there, and Jim Jones apparently decided that the right thing to do was to have his entire, all the members of his society drink a poisoned Kool-Aid, which, by the way, uh, I suspect that the Kool-Aid company took a very dim view of his use of their product. It probably really hurt their sales. Anyway, that's an aside. And a huge number of those people did, in fact, take the Kool-Aid and died. Okay. So a few didn't, I think, or a few somehow survived. And so the question becomes, which is Caleb's question, what do we make of that society? It apparently was bad, for the society. It didn't last long. That's what I mean, bad. So where did they fail? Did they have the brief be fruitful and multiply preen? I think they did. I mean, I suspect they did. And uh, did they have children must be raised in the faith preen? I don't know this, but I suspect so. If you have kids, they should become part of the Jim Jones Society, I'll call it. Yes. So whatever happened to that society, because it didn't last long, is presumably not because the society failed to have these two things. It must be some other reason. And I think I know the reason. Um, and we'll get to that. Does anybody think they know the reason?
I think I know, or at least it's tangentially related.
Okay, Ryan.
Pretty sure Jim Jones sort of invented that society as a way of monetarily exploiting people. So I think the society was never intended to have a long life, and that's why he, tried to kill everyone that was part of it. He just wanted their money.
Oh, okay.
Plus,
All
when the
right.
U.S. Plus, when the U.S. went to the People's Town, Jonestown, they received reports of people that were being silenced of the abuse that they were facing. So that was another reason, because Jim Jones knew that
Oh,
that would
a
get
little
out.
slower, Caleb. I missed
Oh,
some words.
so sorry.
Yeah.
So when the U.S. went to Jonestown, they heard reports of people that were in Jonestown that had negative experiences from the abuse they were facing, and they couldn't really talk about it because it was a very culty environment.
Yeah.
So Jim Jones knew that that was going to be known throughout U.S., so he had to like stop it. So that was another reason.
Okay. Were the people in Jonestown who were feeling exploited, was it that like money was being taken or property or, given to the
I would say it's more in terms of like obedience, and it
gotcha.
from what I remember, like even when they were sleeping, they just had like what's his name, Jim Jones, just talking on the radio and whatnot. So you're just all you're hearing is just positive reinforcement of Jim Jones. So it's not really
Uh,
objective at all, and you get this cultish behavior, kind of like online in a way where everyone's kind of hostile, but you don't have anyone that's hostile on the other end. So if there's
wait,
like
wait,
a
wait,
few
wait, wait,
people,
wait. Hostile. What is this?
well, hostile in the way that if they
Oh,
disagree with you, then they kind of hate you. But it's like an entire populace of people that will hate you if you say anything, so you don't say anything. And when the US
yes,
came, they could actually say something.
I see. Okay. Thanks for that background. By the way, uh, you say that, uh, let's see, uh, you say that this threatening the people and intimidating the people and maybe even punishing the people if they didn't uh, go along with it, and also excluding information from their own members, outside world information, for example. You say that like it's a bad thing. And but in preen theory, it might be a very good strategy. And it's certainly something that Karl Marx, for example, suggested, control the means of control the media, basically. All right. North Korea does that. Um, let's see, there's other examples. In fact, all societies do it. All right. Uh, okay, so
Professor?
yes.
Um, yeah, I think I have some example. What were the two properties of those prints that the children should be in the same kind of culture, and what was the other one?
That they should go and have kids, be fruitful and multiply, produce new generations,
So I
potential
mean,
members.
yeah, I have examples of them. For example, people who become monks, right? At least in India, there are societies which prevent you once you're initiated into the monkhood, you cannot marry and you cannot have children. So they don't go recruit, but because of these, I think mutations in the in the other cultural children who don't align with the society or think that the society is in vain, they kind of recruit the people and join this society, right? So they don't have this preens that you're mentioning in that property.
Yeah, it's a good point. Um, uh, but I want to continue on the Jamestown thing, and then maybe we'll get to these other societies. So these are good examples that are coming up, but I want to learn some more about the Jamestown thing. Okay, so let's see. Uh, well, uh, uh, Grayson, or okay, Grayson.
I think Julian had his hand up first.
Yes, I now see that he did. Okay, so Julian, sorry.
Thank you, Grayson. Yes, I think connecting it back to Jonestown with like preen theory, as Caleb was saying, I think when that congressman was trying to leave, a ton of people came up to him and said like, "We want you to take us with you." A lot
Ah,
of them faced like abuses there. It was like just hard labor. Obviously it was a very humid environment and they were working all day. A lot of times they were beat or just ridiculed into being submissive, and a lot of them wanted to leave. And I think that maybe in the spirit of keeping the preen alive and reproducing, it may have actually been better to like martyr themselves than to allow the colony to fall apart, and then people would see that it's a fraud
yeah. I
in his
mean,
mind.
those are That's an interesting angle on it too, Julian. Uh, Glover, Glover.
Glover, yeah, it's the same.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay, Grayson.
Yeah, sorry, I guess I was thinking sort of the same thing that Julian was. It seems as though the cults that we really remember are the ones that ended in kind of a spectacular way, like the Jonestown, David Koresh, the Heaven's
Yes.
Gate people. And I'm sure there are cults that are just broken up by some illegal activity that no one remembers all the time.
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, one question that is worth exploring is, and we will get to this, is the Jonestown and some of these other cults we're talking about did not violate this rule of be fruitful and multiply and stay in the faith. They didn't violate that. Nonetheless, they failed. Yes, I mean, you don't find anybody in those societies anymore. Uh, so the society's cultural preens have, to a large extent, failed. Um, however, so we need to find another reason if we're going to explain the failure of those societies, and and we'll get to that because there is another reason I think that we can clarify of why these ones failed. Now, with regard to the monks, uh, yeah, we discussed this briefly in the other in other on another day, where whether it be the monks or the priesthood of the Catholic Church, they take a vow of celibacy. And yes, that means that they're not going to be fruitful and multiply. However, uh, it does not mean that those who aren't fruitful and multiply will necessarily not contribute to the society. They, the priesthood contributes to the society in other ways. Uh, at any rate, good discussion, and we still need a reason why something like Jonestown did fail, and we'll get to at least a pre-theoretic uh, answer later. Okay, so moving on. Now that we know that a lot of religions and national societies use something like these two preens because it has the obvious advantage of replacing dying copies. Notice, by the way, that the cultural preens and Catholic society are much longer lived objects than the members themselves are. Okay, so let's move on. This is a different but related topic.
Not all children exposed to the Catholic society will stay the course. Some will abandon the faith, some will only go to church on holidays, some will become pope. Why does this happen? Typically, the Catholic society will come into conflict with other societies for control of the child's behavior and their future acquisition of cultural preens. For example, perhaps the child will become a fan of the local professional sports team. That is, the fan society will succeed in infusing some initial cultural preens and begin controlling some behavior. What is to be done when the championship game falls on a Sunday? When the child reaches adolescence, the genetic preens stored in their nucleic acid molecules at birth will make a strong bid for greater control. The adolescent will discover sex, and the Catholic society's cultural preen set will have to compete with the genetic preen set for behavioral control. The Catholic society's cultural preen set has traditionally contained cultural preens that encourage sex but only within wedlock and only for the purpose of procreation. There are lots of Catholics, so this half-empty/half-full stance may have worked well. Figure 7, the cat.
Okay, so figure 7. So this is a lovely painting, actually, of the catechism. For those who aren't Catholic or don't know about this, a priest, the guy sitting on the chair, educates the young. He's infusing cultural preens into the young's brains about the basic fundamental beliefs of Catholicism. Okay. And now the caption is the catechism. That boy on the left, though, probably not going to be Pope, right? Because it's quite clear that he has started to acquire other interests. Yes? And those other interests are going to compete with the Catholic society for control of his behavior.
As an aside, discord between the genetic preens stored in nucleic acid molecules at birth and the cultural preens acquired from societies can have psychological consequences, for example, when one does covet thy neighbor's wife. Nietzsche, Freud, and others have explored this discord, sometimes seeing it as a conflict between civilization and human nature.
Okay, and so a conflict between civilization and human nature has been a topic of philosophers and, in the case of Freud, psychologists for a long, long time. And we will explain, and I'll briefly say, why these conflicts occur. Because the preens that a person acquired, for example, as a Catholic, reside in that person's head. And by means we'll describe, they exert pressure and some degree of control of that person's behavior. But the genes also are preens stored in this one person, and they also exert pressure to on the individual to behave in another way. There's no reason why these two different preens, that one's societal, one's genetic, should be in agreement. And they're not in agreement, right? So we're all walking around with these contradictory preens that are telling us how to behave in different situations. Okay. But they are not, they didn't take a symbolic logic course in consistency.
Even if the child abandons Catholicism entirely, the cultural preens that have been infused may influence behavior and emotions throughout life. How this lasting influence is created will be discussed in more detail in Cultural Preens and Emotions. A human is a limited resource with a finite lifespan. At each moment, a human can execute some fixed number of brain cycles and expend a fixed amount of energy. It is not possible to provide full service to all societies encountered. In the end, you will acquire cultural preens from many different societies, and each will get a share of your resources. The cultural preens of a society that acquires a small share will have little influence on you. Those of a society that gets a significant share will regularly impact your behavior and emotions and become part of your life. If some society acquires an exceptionally large share, it will occupy a huge portion of your time, energy, and thoughts, and become a center of your existence.
Okay, so here's the question. What are the societies that have a large share of your resources? And given where we are and who you are, it's pretty clear. You, in sort of broad terms, have given a large share of your resources to what we could call the scholarly society or the academic society. And, it can be more specific than that for each of you individually. Maybe the computer science or the electrical engineering society. It may be sociology society that got a large share. Even if you're a computer science, it may be theoretical computer science or AI that got a large share. And much of your time, energy, and thoughts will now be focused on this society. Yes. And further, I would say that within the societies that have large shares of your resources, it is very likely that you are inclined to move up the positional preens ladder to more and more rewarding positions, right? So a huge number of you right now, huge number, well, a big portion of you right now are probably here to get master's degrees or PhDs. So you're trying to work your way up, which the societies have arranged to give you more rewards to keep you moving up. Okay, so any remarks on that? Do any of you have, other than your academic interests, which you have given a large amount of your resources to, are there other things that are the center of your existence? I mean, that you give a lot of time and energy to? When I was in graduate school, I remember giving a lot of time and energy to becoming a rock star, to becoming a great rock guitarist. Didn't work out, by the way, but I did. Okay, and
I can recognize the same. I was in a band. I was playing bass guitar
yeah,
for many years. I had the same idea. We did a few shows. We sucked, and you know, and he never went anywhere. I did play soccer for many, many years, and probably soccer is still the number one game for me. Although I still watch football and basketball,
Right.
and music concerts. I go to concerts all the time, and I have done that. I mean, back in the 70s, which you can recognize, I would go to 60 concerts in 1 month. You know, uh,
Wow.
things like hitchhiking to the concerts, because that you could do that at that time, not
Yeah,
today.
yeah.
And that has stayed. I still, instead of going to a lot of concerts, I go to a few, but I try to get good seats. That's really the only difference.
Yes. Yes. And um, uh, by being involved in music the way you are, you're using resources. I mean, you spend money to get those tickets. You probably don't hitchhike there, but
No.
take some. Okay, and okay, and this raises a question. Like, I have a colleague in this is in number theory, and he's a brilliant number theorist. Okay, he also writes operas, which have actually been performed. It's one thing to sit in your room, but actually been performed. Now, he has acquired a very high position both in mathematics and in music. But I ask myself, if you're going to spend resources in both endeavors so that you become really, really great in both, would you have been better off abandoning one and dedicating those resources to the other? You may not have the option of doing any of that, but it is an interesting question. Is it good to see this really terrific mathematician writing operas? Like, we could take Puccini. I guess he probably didn't do a lot of mathematics. Okay. And we can take a lot of other mathematicians who never did anything as, in music like this guy I'm talking about did. So when you have your resources spread across many societies, uh, presumably you may not do as well in those societies, achieve as high a position as you would if you didn't have that. Now, this is not a recommendation of how to live your life. Uh, you know, live your life the way you want to live your life, and or at least the way your cultural genes will tell you, and genes tell you how to live your life. Uh, this isn't about good and bad. It's just an interesting phenomena. Yes, someone raised their hand, I think, and I'd be happy to hear from them. Uh, yeah, Mike Terrakova.
Hello. Can you hear
Hello,
me?
I can.
Yeah, I just had a quick comment about the Catholicism part. I think it was
Yeah.
very interesting. I grew up going to Catholic school as a kid,
Mhm.
and I wasn't really raised Catholic, but I saw a lot of kids that had a lot of beliefs enforced by their parents without
Yes,
them kind of coming to them themselves. And I found it
yes.
like very interesting how those kids that rebelled the most probably had their life shaped the most because they were in like a constant state of rebellion. And it kind of seems like those preens worked even though they were kind of rebelling against it, and it might have taken in a completely different direction.
Wait.
It was
So,
just
can you elaborate a little bit on that? So, these kids had acquired a lot of Catholic um, cultural preens, and their parents, you know, sort of made them uh, acquire them. And then you were talking something about their rebelling against it. Is that the point?
yeah, I think it's interesting how it might have went in a completely opposite direction than what the parents expected. And it might be even more impactful on their life than if they did follow everything and believe everything their parents said.
Yeah, that's an interesting consideration. So how do I interpret what happened there? Um, yeah, I mean, we have the traditional notion that the parents pushed too hard and the kid rebelled, right? But I'm interested in knowing what happened in terms of the preens in that kid. Um, my guess is that he had all these cultural preens, and he probably, and I'm making this up, and maybe I'm just being self-serving to make this up. But my guess is he wasn't on his way to becoming Pope. Okay, that he was, because of the positional cultural preens of the society, Catholic society that he was in, that he wasn't competing for better and better positions there. He wasn't successfully competing. Yeah. And that and so he took opportunities in other cultures where he did have the tools to succeed, apparently, and went in that direction. So, am I just being self-serving? But that's a plausible explanation of what happened. I mean, you know, I've dedicated a lot of my life to the academic world, right? Uh, and but I also dedicated, uh, like Marco, a considerable amount of time when I was younger to the rock and roll world. Okay. But guess what? When moving up positions, to become signed by Capitol Records or whatever it was at the time, I did not win those competitions, right? And frankly, in retrospect, like Marco, I sucked. Okay. And so I wasn't getting further in that. And I suppose that had to do, therefore, I went to the society where I was moving up pretty well. Okay. So, Marco,
And Len,
please.
just to give you going back to your somebody that may actually done well in both. I don't know if you know, but you probably do. That Brian May, lead guitarist of Queen, is
Yeah.
actually an astrophysicist with a PhD from Imperial College of London. Now, he obviously did better as a lead guitarist than an astrophysicist, but obviously I see him still going to conferences of astrophysicists and so forth. So he has actually maintained that second job in a sense all these
Wow.
years.
Yeah, I am impressed by that. But and by the way, Brian May is terrific,
Yep.
terrific guitarist. Uh, right. Okay. Thanks. Um, okay. Sampad Mahanti.
Yeah, I was saying that when we say the one would be better expending the resources on one, we need to have a metric on what better means, right?
Um, no, I wasn't saying one would be better.
Instead of
I don't.
distributing the, let's say, resources on multiple things, let's say two or three instead of one, they might actually be somehow better at one, putting the resources on one instead of three.
That uh, okay. So that seems like a reasonable hypothesis that if you're going to devote a lot of resources to three things, you're probably not going to succeed as well in getting up that ladder of more and more rewarding positions in any one of them. That if you had focused on that. I'm not making a judgment about whether it's better or worse to do this. I'm just observing.
Yeah, but yeah,
Okay.
within that framework, I think there would be it's not necessarily true. The way you make, for example, how your brain is plastic and all these things, you learning a separate language could influence your ability to do mathematics. It is not true that just spending all your time in mathematics would actually make you a better mathematician. Well, it will make you a much
Yeah,
more trained mathematician, but not necessarily
right.
great.
It could. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, not necessarily. It will make you creative. It could happen that for some people, doing something else actually makes them more creative.
I would like to think so. So while I don't try to play guitar like Jimi Hendrix anymore, I do listen to music and spend time with my grandkids and all of that stuff. And yes, that requires me to use resources. I'd like to think that it helps me be a mathematician as well. Uh, I don't know that that's true. Um, I remember one famous mathematician who was a teacher of mine back at Berkeley, um, suggested that if you want to become a really good mathematician, uh, sleep during the day and only get up when the sun goes down so that you never see the sun and you're always depressed. And so you will only think about it's a good environment to be a mathematician. Now, I doubt if that's good words to live by, but he was saying, don't allow yourself to get distracted. Don't spend. I don't know what's right or wrong in here, just observing. Okay, yes, other comments? Sampath, you have more?
I have also another way to look at the same thing. For example, you might train in instead of like taking this whole thing as a just knowledge ecosystem. If you make them more specialized, you may say one is training in mathematics, but at the same time also devoting the resources in learning biology, which seemingly maybe 50, 60 years ago may not, or 100 years ago may not, people would not have seen a much of a connection probably. So that does make them to be a very good, maybe today, a very good, uh, I don't know, person who is very productive in actually solving real world problems.
Yeah, it's a good point. I can certainly relate what you say to my own career. And okay, so I don't have an answer, but so I'm going to leave that just as, something to be contemplated. Is it people who, are just, focused and OCD about one particular area? Are they more likely to do well in that area? I don't know. Okay. So, yes. Okay. Let's move on a little bit. Jose Luis had something to say. Uh, so go ahead, Jose.
I was going to. So I'm still trying to parse what it all means, but I wanted to push back off something on the first part of the class about this kind of prey uh, concept of preens and so on. So I think I see a major flaw in this model, in which it kind of negates individual agency. So I do have ideas, and I believe in some of them, and then certainly I've learned them through all kind of acculturation and different exposure to different ideas. But I believe I chose them. So I don't believe I'm being a prey of this, I know, law of gravity preen that suddenly made me believe the law of gravity. And also I not only have like the Newtonian view of gravity, I may also have the more Einstein theory of gravity. And again, I don't feel prey to any of them. I feel that I somehow got convinced, and maybe I don't know enough physics or math to really be fully convinced.
Of course.
And
Oh,
yeah, so maybe that's maybe my major core critique, and then I have other.
Let me answer that, and then if you have more, because I'll forget. Okay. So yes. Now let me ask you this, Jose Luis. Uh, do you know that you have genes inside of yourself?
Well, I do know because I do work on some genetics. So yes, I do.
Yeah, that
I mean,
was
maybe I didn't know when I was 5 years old, but at this point I do.
right. You know it through scholarship.
Yeah.
But if I had presented all of this theory to you back before Darwin and told you that there were genes in the stuff, you would have no reason in your personal experience to tell you that there were. You would think that your decisions, for example, on choosing a mate or what you eat and don't eat, and etc., were your own personal decisions. But in fact, you know, at this point, you may accept that a lot of those decisions you're making are at least highly influenced by your genes.
Yeah, I mean, so we are influenced, but well, I guess the main point is that it's yes, we are influenced by genes, we are influenced by environment, and there's a deeper philosophical question of are we proposing a fully deterministic theory or not, or there's some kind of free will. We want to go to the philosophical part of this.
Yeah.
I do believe that there's some. I mean, I'm not opposed to a complete deterministic theory, but I would like to believe there's some free will, and I would like to have some agency in my choices. So
Yes.
that's kind of the main point.
So yes, believe in it. Let me make something clear, or unclear, but I am not teaching truth here in some transcendental sense, right? I'm a member of the Society of Scienticians, right? And so I'm presenting what I think is scientific truth, but it has no more transcendental qualities of truth than does the Catholic Church or does your personal view of the world or anything else, right? I'm just doing science here. There's no great
I need to
truth.
push back against that. I mean, the scientific process has some method, and part of it is giving evidence and experiments and things like that. I don't think we have got to that yet, so I can't give you the benefit of the doubt. But I think we'll have to go there to call this scientific. I would still say it's kind of a theory or a sociological theory, which will be probably hard to prove, and we can leave it at that. But if you want to call it science, I think that's much higher burden of proof or evidence. Just for the record.
Well, yes, and I agree with you. And by the way, do you believe in science, in mathematical truth?
That's, I mean, I did study some philosophy.
Huh?
I did study some philosophy early in my life. So are you telling me I'm a Platonist? Do I believe in the existence of true forms outside of like the reality that we see? Oh, I mean, Aristotelian in which do I believe in empiricism? I don't know. This rationalism versus empiricism has been going for like, I don't know, 2,500 years. I don't know. I certainly know they're mathematics. I know they're like beautiful forms of mathematics. I don't know. Do they exist outside of my head in some
Yeah, well,
way?
among other things, we don't have scientific evidence. We didn't do experiments, right? Math doesn't use the scientific method. So, okay, so there's different ways of going about this thing. We're going to get into all of that in this course, everything I think, or a large part of the things you raised the issue of. And of course, remember when I put on my Preens hat? Okay. If I'm just walking down the street, I'm not thinking about my Preens hat. You know, there was a time when if the Lakers lost a basketball game, I'd be depressed for a week, right? That ain't preen theoretic. That's just me and all the memes and preens and everything that I acquired in my head. Um, So the when we walk down the street, we're just being ourselves and we think we're the agents of what is going on. And we make decisions and we feel things and all of that. Yes, and that all that's real. But there is this other view, which I would consider more scientific or mathematical or whatever it should be called, that says there's another way to look at this. And from this point of view, yeah, you may not have as much agency as you would like to think.
Yeah, okay. So I can take that sociological theory. But I would say actually this example you just gave about the Lakers is a very good example of prime theory. You somehow identified with the Lakers, the people that like the Lakers, and you felt bad because that's your group and you felt something about it.
Of course.
With many other kind of sociological theories.
Sure. And by the way, you know, for what it's worth, of course, that applies to politics. Yes.
Well, it applies tremendously to politics as we are living in.
Of course.
The other very minor thing I'll set up is you use society as societies holding primes. I think society is maybe too large a word. It's more like groups within societies, like any complex country or like the US. Well, there are many, many different groups and ideologies. So societies would be like with a very lowercase s or something.
Okay,
so
okay.
A group,
no.
or identity group, or cultural set group, or something like that, because it's very.
We are just short of defining what I'll call sub-societies and their place. And eventually that leads to the societal ecosystem. But we haven't got there yet. Okay, any other comments before we go on? All right, let's start sharing again. Let's have a discussion of how does mutation occur in nature? So let's just chat about that. How does it happen? I mean, what's the process?
Chemicals or like radiation will hit your DNA and then cause changes in base pairs, which will be incorporated in your replication. And then I guess you could go to another level, and it's like if mutation as a output that is like favorable, then it could be incorporated into the next generation, selected upon, or it could just be kind of incorporated as non-coding DNA and just like be a silent mutation.
Okay, yes. So Catcher Salazar. Yes, that's the answer I was hoping you'd give. The problem is it's not what really happens, or at least it's overlooking a lot of things that are very important. And so that's really not what happens. And I'm gonna explain what I'm saying does happen in what follows. And this is something that biologists, I've never seen a biologist aware of this at all. And I've hung out with biologists, by the way, so you know I do know to some extent their mindsets. Okay, I'm skipping a little bit. This is directly from DTD. So I'm going to go into what is sort of what Catcher said, and we're going to start contemplating it.
Today, the view of many biologists might be described informally as follows. Random environmental events, such as cosmic rays, mutate DNA and give rise to variations that natural selection acts upon.
So that's basically what Catcher said to us. And it's basically, I've never heard, when discussing it, anyone, including biologists, who don't subscribe to this view. Not that I've, polled every biologist in the world. Okay.
I do not subscribe to this view. It attributes evolution solely to the actions of the environment. The environment creates variation, and the environment selects the variants that will be favored. While in a certain sense this must be the case, just as it must be the case that evolution is the result of the laws of physics, it is not adequate. By and large, biological evolution is the result of a complex interaction between organisms and their environment. The role of the organism in the creation of variation is critical, and our understanding of evolution cannot be complete without considering it. The commonly held view of evolution might give rise to the following description of the impact of cosmic rays. A strand of DNA gets mutated by a cosmic ray. Babies born with mutations may be more or less fit for the environment into which they are born. Natural selection will favor the survival of the more fit and disfavor the survival of the less fit. But that
Okay, so that's this, what, as far as I can see, sort of the ubiquitous view.
version is not quite right. The start of the description should go something like this. A strand of DNA gets mutated by a cosmic ray. The mutation is almost always repaired by a host of enzymes and other molecules that have evolved specifically to repair such mutations. On rare occasions, the mutation is not repaired. Babies born with mutations may be more or less fit for the environment into which they are born. Natural selection will favor the survival of the more fit and disfavor the survival of the less fit.
Okay, so it is not true that when a cosmic ray hits DNA and mutates it, that's all that happens. What really happens is the cell has spent an extraordinary amount of energy and resources to build a host of enzymes and other molecules that are specifically there to repair such mutations. Okay? So, a cosmic ray hits your skin and some skin cell, it knocks an A out of a strand of DNA. But there's a whole apparatus as complex and as beautiful as the apparatus we saw to reproduce DNA in Dave Barry's animations. There's a whole collection of enzymes that will repair that. And they repair probably almost every mutation. I can't quantify that. It would be rare for these mutations not to get repaired. All right. And it's no accident they get repaired, right? It's a huge investment by the cell in doing just that. Okay.
But that version is not quite right either. The ending of the description should also be amended to give us something like this. A strand of DNA gets mutated by a cosmic ray. The mutation is almost always repaired by a host of enzymes and other molecules that have evolved specifically to repair such mutations. On rare occasions, the mutation is not repaired. Various enzymes and molecules have evolved that intentionally create additional mutations in the DNA. Babies born with mutations may be more or less fit for the environment into which they are born. Natural selection will favor the survival of the more fit and disfavor the survival of the less fit.
So now I've added this idea that the cell itself will intentionally create mutations in its own genome. Okay, and I'll show you that, in fact, that's the case. All right. So
the creation of variation might be described using the following diagram.
So the creation of variation is not just external things cause mutations. And then the mutations lead to mutants, and then the external natural selection will choose mutants that are more fit. Rather, what really happens is external mutations occur. They're almost always repaired by internal enzymes and other molecules. And then the cell intentionally mutates its own genome, internal mutations. And then the offspring are judged by natural selection. So this is a very different view of how the creation of variation that is usually spoken about, right? Yes. Yeah, John?
Just to clarify, the internal mutation that is created by the cell itself, is it a sort of like a spontaneous, a new creation, or is it just that some enzymes are overlooking the repair of the external mutation?
Good question. No, these are mutations which the cell itself inflicts, a loaded word for that, on its own genome and does it intentionally. Okay? All right. So this is
If I can
this is
something. I mean, all these mutations sometimes happen because of errors of copying. So genes are being, I mean, like when the cell replicates, the DNA is duplicated and it has to be copied. And there are errors of that type that happens sometimes. And most of them are really fixed, but from time to time, something goes through. And the same thing with the cancer and other things, that you get some somatic mutations that confirm some properties to the cell. So it's not so much of, I mean, I don't think it's an intentional process. It's more like errors in the machinery. Even if the machine is very, very good, you have some errors.
well, then you and I disagree, but you would agree, I think, with the traditional view. I'm saying the traditional view is incomplete, and this is an important modification of that. And these internal mutations are as intentional and directed as could possibly be. Okay. And, we're going to explore this, right?
But then why a cancer cell happens in an organism? I mean, like, I certainly wouldn't want, I mean, I don't know what the intention of the cancer, my normal cell that's finally turned cancerous is, but certainly I don't like it. I mean, I wouldn't
Yes.
like cancer because cells turn cancerous. And I don't know what the intentions are. I mean, I think that would be too overloaded.
Right. And very shortly, you'll see me discuss that kind of issue. All right. So keep this in mind, because it's going to come back to us when we go back to, cultural prenes as well. Okay, so let's move on.
In general. Proposition 3. Variation is primarily the result of processes carefully programmed by presets. I use the term programmed deliberately. To appreciate why this term is appropriate, I recommend that you watch the YouTube video by Drew Berry, Animations of Unseeable Biology, 9 minutes, 9 seconds, which illustrates how cellular processes, division in this case, are not simply the result of chemicals reacting in a cytoplasmic soup but are often programmed extravaganzas with millions of choreographed molecular robots delivering supply.
Well, this part we've done, so I'll skip. Okay. All right. Catcher.
Yeah, I would just ask, how does like a biophysical process, or like, all the just polymerases are just molecules, and the way they're biochemically constructed, they have issues with process sensitivity sometimes. How does that biochemical slash biophysical process have intent, in your view at least?
Have intent?
Yeah.
It doesn't. None of this, there's no intent on anything out there. These are just things that happen. And the cell didn't think about how it should mutate itself, its own genome. Uh, it didn't sit back and say, God, what can I do? No, it's just that cells that did not mutate their own genome didn't survive. And the only ones we have around are the ones that do. That may be too broad a statement, but basically it's right. Okay? That's what I'm saying. Just like the struggle to survive doesn't involve pain and, et cetera. The words we use, uh, like as I used intentional, uh, it's important that you not take all of the connotations that word has acquired. I'm saying they do it on purpose. But why they do it is just because those that didn't do it are probably no longer with us. So let's go on and maybe some of it will get clarified. Well, hang on. Try this again.
In the next chapter we will see how HIV has evolved a sophisticated program of intentional mutations in its nucleic acid molecules to create variation and increase the chances of survival. There is an interesting possibility that seems worth investigating. I'll describe it informally. Is it the case that external mutations, those caused by the environment acting from outside the cell, are largely undesirable and seldom give rise to offspring that are more fit, while internal mutations, those programmed by the genes, are largely responsible for the creation of offspring that are more fit? For example, cosmic rays appear to cause cancer, but since these rays seem to distribute their energy randomly, it seems quite improbable that the damage they cause would fortuitously result in offspring with greater fitness. On the other hand, in humans, it appears that the
Okay. So this is partially inconsistent with the observation. Yeah, external forces acting on the cell can cause things like cancer, not desirable to the genes, right? Okay. But if you look at it, what are the odds that a cosmic ray is going to come down, hit a piece of DNA, and lead to a being with greater fit that doesn't get repaired, and that leads to a fitter individual, right? Could it happen? Possibly it could, but I think the odds are very small of it. And if you were a collection of genes, you'd probably prefer to repair all of those external insults rather than hope that let them alone and hope that one of them would lead to greater fitness for your gene set. Okay. So I'm saying that external insults are undesirable and the cell works very hard to repair them. It's these internal mutations that lead to greater fitness.
On the other hand, in humans, it appears that the genes have very carefully programmed the positions where homologous recombination is likely to occur during meiosis. Fell, 2013. This is a means by which the fitness landscape can be explored in a directed, non-random way.
If that meant anything to you, fine. If it didn't, also fine. Okay, and this is a brief remark regarding cellular programming, because I'm saying the cell its behavior is programmed, and okay, and this will, if you don't follow this, that's fine too. I'll read it out loud. Uh, because the protein folding problem is NP complete, if NP is unequal to P, then there are amino acid sequences that cannot fold quickly in nature. That is, given a raw sequence of amino acids, it's going to fold itself up to, presumably reach the lowest free energy. But how long does it take to do that? All right. And I'm saying if NP is unequal to P, it has to take a long time. And the reason for this is since otherwise we could let them fold, if they folded quickly, image their structures, and use this approach to solve NP-complete problems quickly. We can, in fact, if they would fold, we can use X-ray crystallography to show us the folding. And since the folding problems NP-complete, we could encode things like factoring in how that folding occurs. So we could solve NP-complete problems quickly, and that would violate NP is equal to P. Okay, and one of the consequences of this is that if cells allowed for random mutations of the DNA that encodes proteins, it seems likely that the resulting proteins would often fail to fold during the life of the cell because they don't fold quickly. Hence, it is incumbent upon cells to carefully program mutations to ensure that mutants have a high probability of folding quickly. Mutated, the protein amino acid sequence built by mutant DNA. They still have to fold quickly or they're useless. And VDJ rearrangement is an example of such programming. You may not know what that means. This may explain why cellular proteins are found in families with similar structures. Now, I've heard recently that AI has made great progress. Oh, yeah, Grayson?
Does this mean that cells, through their internal mutation direction, are able to solve NP hard problems?
No, it means just the opposite. What it means is that in the real world of chemistry, a sequence of amino acids, like if I created it in the lab, we know that it will, in fact, fold into its minimum free energy form. The question that is almost never asked is, well, how long does it take to go from the so-called primary sequence to its optimally folded version? And I think for most, chemists and, thermodynamics, physical chemists, I guess they're called, and for physicists, they may presume mistakenly, well, that's going to happen fast. But it doesn't happen fast. Because if it did happen fast, we could exploit that quickness to solve NP-complete problems. Okay. And if NP is unequal to P, we can't solve those quickly. Okay. Therefore, if you just take a random sequence of amino acids, primary sequence, and drop it into some salt water, it could take billions of years for it to finally reach its free energy minimum. Okay, and in fact, it must take a long time. Otherwise, we could solve NP-complete problems in polynomial time. So what does that say? It says, a lot of these primary sequences won't fold in the life of a cell. Therefore, cells have to take this into account, again, not by volition, but and make sure that the genes that encode proteins will only encode proteins that are exceptional in that they must fold quickly. And that means essentially that proteins come in families that have similar structures. Did that help at all? Maybe not.
I think
Okay,
so.
catcher. Yeah.
Sorry. So are
Go
you
ahead.
basically saying that we live in some like polynomial solvable subspace of all of the proteins?
Bingo. Yes. Because we can't afford to, be making proteins that are gonna, take 1,000,000 years to fold. They're losers. So cells have crept on finding some that fold and then making little variations in those that have a greater chance of folding than just some random new gene or random new protein. Yes, that's what I'm saying.
So I'm not sure if I'm following here. I mean, well, first, there are many, so I guess we're talking about cellular evolution. First, there are many mutations. Many mutations actually don't change the way the protein folds, which is what would matter in the life of the cell. But there are millions and billions of cells. Most of it, if they have a bad protein, they will die. And cells do evolve reasonably fast, like bacteria evolve pretty fast. And again, it's not that it's a polynomial. I mean, the comment of the student said that if it's a polynomial subset, and I think it's approximation. I mean, what nature is doing is a kind of approximation algorithm. So you're not trying to solve the problem exactly because that would be MP hard and would be impossible.
No.
But it just approximates.
That's not what's going on. The cell isn't just making random proteins and, oh yeah, since there's so many cells, occasionally they fold quickly. No, that's a losing strategy. A better strategy, if you're the genes, is to say, oh, I've got some proteins now that fold well, but I'm going to have mutations. And I want to make sure that when I mutate the genes and therefore create new mutated proteins, I don't want the result to be too random from what the unmutated one was. Because if it is, it's going to never fold. All right. So instead, I will very carefully control how I mutate genes that encode proteins so that I just make little changes of the sort that are likely to take an already quick folding protein and make a new, different, also quick folding protein.
So
And there's a very, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I was saying, what's the process for that selection? I don't know any process.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you asked. Look up VDJ rearrangement.
Okay, I'll Google it.
Okay. All right. Hey, the class has ended. So see you next time. Okay. And once again, thanks for joining me. I'll try to figure out how to get off. Yes.